Now, despite various policies at both a state and federal level aimed at lifting our education performance, the reality is little has improved. And in too many areas, our kids are going backwards, which is a scandal. The problem is that so many of our educators and governing bodies have subscribed to this hard left woke ideology that focuses less on the basics and more on pushing ideology, transgender, climate, Indigenous treaty stuff, all of it onto the next generation. Climate change, as we've seen with Pat Cummings. The question now is, can we ever get back to the basics? Well, Katharine Birbalsingh is the principal who was once dubbed Britain's strictest, I love this, strictest headmistress at Michaela Community School in England, which has consistently, no surprises here, achieved outstanding results from their pupils. She's also the chair of the Social Mobility Commission. I'm delighted to say she's in Sydney, and Katharine Birbalsingh joins us now. Katharine, great to see you. So glad you could join us on the show. How are you enjoying Sydney first?
Morning. Yeah, it's great. It's great to be here. It's so lovely. It's really exciting. I came just over a decade ago, and I was ringing alarm bells then about how you mustn't go down this progressive route. And I'm back again to say the same thing, because unfortunately, Australia has been going down that progressive route in quite a big way, which has now got you placed 70th out of 77 countries when it comes to disciplinary climate in your classrooms, which means you're basically at the bottom of the Western world. But you can turn that around. We just, as you just said, need to go back to basics.
So, Katharine, just tell us briefly, for viewers who aren't familiar with the amazing work you've done in the UK. You're very, very well known in the UK. Just give us a little potted history of the last decade, really.
Yeah, so we opened our school, it's called Michaela, in 2014. We started with 120 year sevens, you know, similar to grade 7. And then now we're a full school with 750 kids, some of them going off to Oxford and Cambridge, all of them hugely successful. Just a few days ago, we got our score for what we call in Britain Progress 8, which demonstrates the progress that children have made from when they join the secondary school at the end of primary right through to the end. And we were placed top in the country.
Congratulations.
So that's really
Great.
exciting, especially when you consider we're in the inner city.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I want to ask about that because your student population is from a fairly socio-economically disadvantaged background. Tell us about that. How many of them are receiving school lunch benefits and all sorts of other help because they've got this disadvantaged background and yet their results are among the very best in the country?
Yes, well, exactly. So you've got a third of them like that, but actually all of them are inner city kids, very standard inner city school with a normal inner city intake that we are not in charge of. It's the local council that gives us our kids. We cannot choose our kids. And some of them have come from families that are really very challenged indeed. And others, the families may not be so challenged, but they certainly aren't rich. They are families who just want the best for their kids, but aren't quite sure necessarily how to go about it. And we managed to do this, I would say, because of our approach, which is much more traditional than progressive teaching has schools doing these days. So when I say traditional, I mean, they call me the strictest headmistress in Britain. It's all a bit of a silly title. But it's because we have consistent behaviour systems in all of our classrooms, which expects the very highest discipline from the children. Because if the kids aren't listening and if they're not behaving, the teachers can't teach. So it's the basic thing that you've got to get right.
So, Katharine, you said you were out here a decade ago and you were sounding the alarm bells. You know, you quoted that alarming OECD statistic about classroom behavior. We had news come out today that I think many of our year 9s can only write at a year 3 level. Where did Australia go wrong? And while you've been here, have you been in a position to give any advice to our local officials, premiers, about what we should be doing to turn this around?
Yeah, well, you're really lucky because Dominic Perrottet seems to be a sensible guy who understands what education needs. And that is clearly having a politician who gets it. We had the equivalent of Michael Gove, who was our education secretary 7, 8 years ago, and he made a real difference politically. And then what you need are some teachers and head teachers, principals on the ground who can make a difference. People like me who can change their school environment and make it successful by, one, looking at the discipline, two, looking at the teaching methods. You want your teaching to be explicit from the front, where the teacher is leading the learning. And I know your viewers will think, well, what do you mean? The teacher leads the learning? Obviously, that's what happens. But I promise you nowadays, since the last 20, 30 years, it's the case that desks will be in groups where the children are looking at each other and the teacher moves amongst those desks, keeping children on task, as opposed to the desks being in rows where the teacher is at the front leading that learning. And the whole concept of adult authority, we've sort of lost that, not just in our schools, but in our families too, where parents or teachers try and be friends with their kids, as opposed to you want to seek admiration, you want to seek respect from the children, but you don't want to be friends with them. We need to be in charge as adults, in authority, leading the learning.
Katharine, you famously criticised British schools for their culture of excuses and low standards, for the sea of bureaucracy, very, very important, and what you've just referred to, the chaos of our classrooms. That would describe Australian classrooms and schools very accurately. How can parents find out that their children are getting the sort of education that you offer? What should they be asking?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So traditionalism is code for good, right?
Yes.
So if the website of the school talks about how traditional they are, the idea of going back to basics, if they talk about reading and writing, the importance of mathematics, then that's great. If they're talking about themes and cross-curricular projects and things that don't really speak to the parent,
well, that's Katharine.
If you as a parent don't understand.
Yes.
Yeah,
if
I know.
the parent doesn't understand it, that's a great
we need
point.
a whole
Rita,
bunch.
Yep. Sorry, Rita, just quickly.
Well, I was just going to say,
Yeah, so as a parent,
the student-led learning that you touched on before, and this triumph of feelings and cross-curriculum objections, just if you've got that in your school, and just about every parent who's got a kid in school would be familiar with those terms, what can you do? What can you do to encourage the school to get back to basics and traditional learning?
Well, you can obviously talk to them about it, but a bigger thing is needed in Australia. You need your politicians on board. You need a number of teachers on board. You need to start a kind of ground revolution. That's what happened in the UK. I'm not the only one who, in the UK, a bunch of us, really through social media, we managed to meet in that sense. And, you know, yesterday I attended the Research Ed conference here in Sydney, which had a bunch of teachers looking to do things differently. So you mustn't think that all teachers are on board with the more progressive way of doing things. There are a lot of teachers who are trying to seek out traditionalism. And if parents and teachers can somehow get together and argue this, including the politicians, then you will make a difference for the entire country. In terms of parents and what they can do, look, I think a lot of support they need to give their child at home. If they're not learning the basics, then you sort of need to do that at home, you know, with your child. And you might think, well, how can it be so bad that the parent needs to take over? Well, sometimes it may just be that bad. And then obviously you can talk to the principal, you can talk to the teachers about doing things in a more traditional fashion. But it's been going on for so long that sometimes it can be difficult to know exactly what to do as a school. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm just trying to spread the word, really, about how to make your school more traditional with your discipline, traditional teaching methods, and also traditional values. You want your children taking personal responsibility, having a duty towards others, teaching them gratitude for all the work that you do for them. That's both parents and the teachers. You know, when mum cooks them dinner, you need to say to them, this is how long it took me to make that dinner. So it would be a good idea to say thank you. Teach them.
Fantastic. Katharine Birbalsingh, and you're here with the Centre for Independent Studies, the CIS, great organisation. Tom Switzer and the team do a great job there.
Yes.
So great you're here in Sydney. It doesn't always rain, I promise you. Hopefully you get to enjoy a little bit of it while you're here. Thanks so much for coming on Outsiders this morning, and thanks for being here in Australia. And you can, of course, go to the Centre for Independent Studies website, cis.org.au, and even better, sign up. They do sensational work there, and well done for bringing Katharine out here.